Hi guys, and welcome back to another video. So today we are going to be doing more Genshin fan art, and as you can tell by today's thumbnail, I'm actually drawing Albedo. Now the reason why I'm drawing Albedo and not some other Genshin character today, because there's plenty of Genshin characters I have not drawn yet. I realized I never drawn Albedo in his actual outfit, not in this kind of like cafe uniform outfit that they dropped as some kind of promotion for something like a long time ago. And Albedo's like one of those characters that I've always doodled a lot or just gravitated towards, because him and Bennett and Kaya, I guess, and Barbara, I guess those four in particular, I pretty much like committed their outfit to memory for the most part, or at least like get the general essence of them quite easily. So I tend to doodle them a lot, especially like before. But now that I've been mostly drawing like VTuber fan art and occasionally some Genshin fan art in my sketchbook, I haven't drawn Albedo in a while, and I think because of that I didn't notice that I never drawn him as an actual like finished piece of illustration, like a finished piece, yeah, for just like any kind of digital drawing other than the cafe waiter outfit one. And a part of me kind of forgot, because when I was at Anime Fawn earlier this year, like in August, I believe Laura Stahl and Chris Hackney and Koi Dao were some of the people that were guests, honorary guests, I guess. I don't know how you explain it. Guest voice actors like at Anime Fawn. And there was an influx of people buying like prints for their Genshin character voice actor like roles and stuff, because they wanted people to sign them. And I noticed that a lot of people were buying my Cafe Albedo, and I forgot the reason why, but I forgot, like, you know, there's voice actors as guests and stuff. And I remember some people coming up to me and being like, oh, like Laura Stahl and Koida really liked your illustrations because I got them, like the prints I got them signed. And I'm just thinking like, oh my god, the only Albedo print I had was of the cafe one. Just for me, it's like I feel kind of embarrassed that's the only one I had. But yeah, let's draw Albedo today because I haven't drawn him in his actual outfit. Okay, so let me think. Okay, so I did not have a plan going into this directly, as in usually some of the pieces where I have a character in mind that I like to draw or planning to draw. Sometimes I do like preliminary sketches or thumbnail sketches just to get the general either composition, posing, or just to throw down ideas so I'm not too lost. Now, the one I did of Albedo right now is basically almost like a pose that I default into, and I basically just kind of winged it. I probably should have done initial planning and even thought of like the background and kind of the atmosphere that I kind of wanted to accomplish for this piece, but I didn't. So we're gonna run into a few problems in a bit. I personally didn't really like the pose that I ended up with. I wanted to do something more dynamic and probably added something so it looks like he was kind of in either like in the middle of his burst or using his burst, because it would have been fun to do like crystals, like the geo crystals, or just kind of like that intense glowing lighting around him would have been fun to do, but I opted for something different. So last week, I believe for Saturday's video, I did an illustration of Ike Eveland in some very casual clothes in front of a big window, and the light was peering through behind him. And in that piece, I decided to do a bit of a different kind of lighting. So I tried to make it look like he was being lit from behind, which means there's kind of more of a rim lighting around him, and the rest of his, rest of the figure is covered in shadow. So more or less like in a cooler toned color, if that makes sense. And like I tried to mute the colors a little bit because things that tend to be in shadow tend to not have as much detail visible. So I tried my best to do that, but then I ran into the problem that I really like things with a little bit more contrast or being able to push those dark values, which I did not do in Ike's piece, and I don't think I executed it that well. So I, in the back of my brain, kind of wanted like a redemption at doing the backlit idea, but I don't know if I achieved it correctly, because there's like two methods how I like to add my lighting and my shadows. So one is if I do have a very firm idea, like just a concrete idea of what I want the background and the color scheme to be, I usually try my best to paint the figure in the way with the lighting and the background in consideration. The other method I do is coloring in a more generic way and then adding multiply and addition layers all over it, just to kind of match the color, how to explain it, like to make sure that the character looks like it's actually in the environment, which is what I did for Ike's piece and for this piece for Albedo, which I think that's why I was struggling with the lighting so much. I think it would have been better for me to plan out, especially like for his face, the clothing and everything, to done like actually put it in shadow prior to doing those layers, and then I could have added rim lighting with the blend modes, and I think it would have looked a little bit more natural, but I'm not too sure. Maybe in the future I'll try it again. Maybe not for the next video. Maybe I should do a little bit more testing and stuff first. So for the most part, as for any kind of like draw with me video, I like to kind of split it up into a sketching session, then the kind of rough colors and the background color, and then the kind of like the last third of the video is just me rendering and cleaning up and bringing it up to a certain finish that I think makes the illustration look more or less complete, at least in my eyes. Yeah, I don't think there's much to talk about in terms of a process at this point. I am just in the middle of sketching. I did go much more lighter this time, and then I started to actually start to flesh out and pick out different lines that I think looks a little bit more better, or, you know, making small adjustments before I actually commit to darkening up the lines, because I am going to be using my sketch as kind of like the base for everything, because I particularly don't like using line art on the iPad. Now, speaking of the iPad, if you guys were at my last live stream on Twitch on Thursday, at the end of the stream, my iPad had hit maximum capacity again with its amount of space, so Procreate has once again crashed, and because of, I'm trying to think which illustrations was it, I'm pretty sure 100% it was Sino, and then there was one other person that I drew where I hit max capacity on my iPad and Procreate decides to just like crash. But whenever I try to open up an illustration or a drawing that has crashed on me, usually when it reloads, it takes like a whole square chunk out of my drawing, which becomes quite alarming. But luckily, I don't usually delete the time lapses in the middle of my drawing, so I was able to scrub back in my time lapse, find the most complete portion of my drawing, and then take a screenshot and kind of match it up to the best of my ability, and then kind of paint it in to make it look like it's seamless. But it kind of freaked me out because I've never had that happen before, even when I had Procreate crash before in the past. But like, I haven't had it crash too often, and usually the reason for crashing is actually because lack of space on my iPad, which is what I noticed recently. So yeah, I decided to go back through a few of my other Procreate files, delete a bunch of time lapses and stuff, and I was getting sick and tired of offloading stuff. So I don't know if it's gonna be around Christmas or around like Black Friday. I'm not too sure. Also, like, I know Black Friday is still a thing in Canada, even though I think it's more or less because of like American holiday that we have Black Friday. I'm gonna check and see if the iPad, I don't know if I'm gonna get the 10.9 or the 10.2, either the 10.2 9th generation with 256 gigabytes or the 10.9, and I think that's the 10th generation, which I will also get 256 gigabytes because I am kind of getting sick and tired of offloading. But for the most part, I think if you guys seen my Procreate gallery tour, I have a lot of drawings on this iPad, and for 32 gigabytes, I got a lot of mileage out of it, I think, because I think, let's see, yeah, I got it at the very end, literally like maybe December 30th of 2019, so I always say I got my iPad in 2020, just because it's literally like 2 days off. So yeah, I got pretty much over 2 years of using this iPad, and I drawn a lot on it, and it suddenly became almost like my main drawing program and just my main drawing tool. So I think it's fine for me to actually, you know, think about an upgrade soon, and I don't feel guilty about it. I don't like buying new devices if my previous device is not broken. which is why, like, even before, I had the same laptop for 7 years until my laptop really started to chugging to the point where I got scared of things not saving. It also takes, like, I don't know, almost 10 minutes to load up, like, Google Chrome. So it's like, you know, I still have that laptop, so if I really needed an emergency laptop, I still have it, and it still technically works, but it's just become a little bit harder to use. So yeah, I feel like for me, it's like I always need a justification for upgrading electronics. It's the same for phones. Like, I know some people who get phones like every time the new model comes out, and then some people get phones almost like every 2 years because of the contract and stuff. But for me, it's like I keep my phone until I feel like it's time to upgrade, or my phone has become so laggy or broken or incompatible with something that maybe I need, that I will switch. Okay, back to the drawing because I went on a whole tangent. For the background, the reason why I didn't really want to talk about the background is that I'm not going to keep the background. So I personally like this color scheme a little bit more than my newer one, but I think that's going to be okay. So I decided to look up a reference of Dragon Spine, and I wanted to look up the reference mostly for the color scheme. I remember seeing colors in Dragon Spine that were not purely white and blue for like color temperatures. So when I looked up some references, there were some references that had a little bit more warmer colors in it, almost like a pale purple that is kind of like evident throughout the whole thing, which I liked a lot, because when I think of like icy cold mountain or that kind of scenery, I always think like white, blue, gray, and like maybe like evergreen green, right? So I decided to look up some references, and I found one that had, you know, kind of blues and grays and purples, which look really nice, and almost like a hint of a warmer lighting, and then they have more like golden trees, and I just didn't like how it looked. I also think it's because I'm relying too much on blurring the background instead. So in the future, hopefully, probably not in the near future because it depends on how much patience I have, I want to practice doing more backgrounds where I actually spend more time working on the foliage or working on the actual environment alongside with the character, because I personally like drawing the characters the most, which is why I make them pretty much the focal point of every piece that I do, or I do a lot of like headshots, waist up, anything. Yeah, it's just things that I enjoy, and it just makes me realize like a lot of my weak points. So I think in the future, like, I'll definitely try to tackle the lighting once again, and I think, yeah, I'll just do a bunch of tests, I think, prior to doing like a finished illustration to see if I can get the desired result. I'm also a little scattered-brained right now because the editing program just crashed, and I just I did the recording for the audio for the rest of the video, but because I couldn't save it in time, it didn't save the file. So I'm actually not too sure what exactly I've already talked about and what I haven't talked about. But for the sketch, so I have already put it into Multiply, and I've already duplicated it and have basically like a backup, because if you have access to layers, I think I mentioned this early in the video. If I didn't, I'm sorry, but if you have access to layers and stuff, I actually like relying on the fact that I can have like a backup, because then I don't feel too scared to try like new things. Also, yeah, like I said, I was going to cover up the background and restart, and I think I talked about it, maybe. I basically didn't like how I did the background with the leaves. I think that because of how I placed the foliage, it looked too much symmetrical on each side, which kind of defeats the point of making it look more like natural for me. So I wanted to get rid of it, but because I've already blurred it and I didn't realize that I merged the layers, it was gonna be hard for me to fill up the space and make it look not covered up in a weird way. So I decided that I would just cover up the whole thing and redo the background. So I tried my best to keep a similar color palette, but I also thought that I've always gravitated towards doing such a warm lighting and a warmer background. For me, it's like, I think it's aesthetic I really like, but I also really like cooler tone illustrations or just like atmosphere, and because Dragon Spine is mostly like ice and snow, I thought maybe I will stick to a cooler color palette. So I limited it basically limited the amount of purple I used in this one a little bit. We're gonna color adjust as well so that I can make sure that, you know, certain colors stand out and we can kind of push the values. I think I set this to overlay, so I'm kind of pushing some of the cooler tones even deeper because I started off a little bit too light. And hopefully me adjusting the colors like this doesn't make Albedo look too off. I think it's also because I didn't use the background too much as a guiding point for Albedo's colors, other than like some shadows in his hair and stuff, or like the colors I used in the whites of his jacket. That yeah, I didn't reference the colors too much, and because I knew I was going to add like a multiply layer, an addition layer, and maybe some overlay layers on top to adjust the color scheme of Albedo to the background, I wasn't too worried about it. Yeah, for the eyes, his eye color is not going to stay the same. I didn't realize this because probably it's more like an afterthought, because after adjusting a lot of the colors afterwards with a bunch of blend modes, his eye color is no longer kind of like that turquoisey teal. It becomes a lot more blue, which I realize is kind of like the incorrect color for Albedo's eyes, so I do apologize about that. But I'll try to keep things short because I definitely went on a tangent and a ramble in my previous voiceover, which got deleted, so you guys will never hear it and it's now stuck in the abyss. But for me, I definitely want to redo this piece, not specifically with the same pose, composition, or even the background. I mean just like my energy towards of wanting to draw Albedo finally, like properly. I want to redo it. Because I think I mentioned earlier that I would have liked a more dynamic pose, which makes it look like he was either in the middle of his burst or maybe at the end of his burst or just about to do his burst, because I would have liked to do like the floating crystals, chunks, glowing pieces, and kind of having that dynamic, almost like centralized focus of an illustration, because this one feels very much just like, I don't know if it's just because of his what am I saying? His expression is that it looks like you just caught him and you caught him off guard and he kind of looks a little alarmed. Also sound. So my mic did not record sound for the first half of the session pretty much. I did do this illustration between two sessions because I started the first session too late in the night. I think I started around maybe 1 a.m. So I went to sleep around like 3 a.m. So I only got maybe 2 hours in, which was majority of the sketch, the background, and base coloring. And then I switched over to the next morning or like next afternoon to finish this off, and only a part of the session was actually recorded with sound. I'm not too sure why, because usually I do a test to make sure that things are working properly before I start recording, but I guess it didn't record. But I know some of you guys enjoy having the scratching and scratching of the Apple Pencil on the paper-like screen protector while I talk or with the background music, especially for Draw With Me now, so I will try my best to include them. And I personally like it because I don't have to worry too much about filling the audio space, I guess, as well as like I can still treat it like me filming ASMR videos pretty much, and I kind of can decide whether or not I want it to be an ASMR video or I can do narration. But luckily I already planned to do this one as narration, because I think I would have been super frustrated to find out that if I tried recording this as an ASMR and like more than half of the audio is just cut out. I don't want to think about it. Okay, so for the colors, let me think. I tried my best to make it not too heavily concentrated in terms of the shadows being super dark. Not concentrated, like highly contrasted is maybe the word I'm looking for, because like I said, if something's in shadow, usually the details get a little bit more kind of like almost flattened in a sense, right? Because you can't see it as clearly. But I decided to push the shadows a little bit on his outfit and like everything else other than his face and hair. So I'm hoping that it doesn't come across that his face and hair looks too flat compared to everything else. And basically I'm on the point where I am going to be adjusting the colors anyway, so we're going to see if I can kind of fiddle around and adjust it. So I made a new layer, set it to multiply. I clipped it on top of the now merged color and sketch of Albedo. And at this point, I already changed the sketch color to match closer to some of the elements to make it just a little bit softer. And then I am just kind of fiddling with the multiply colors. And then once I have some of the kind of like the blue tones and the shadows kind of established, I am going in with a highlight by erasing. So I'm erasing that bluish purple multiply layer and kind of just planning where I want the rim lighting to be, because I do want Albedo to look like he is being lit from behind. But to make sure that the lighting gets a little bit more intense, because the background behind him is actually quite bright in terms of how I have it, I wanted to add an additional layer. It's basically add on the blend modes. Some people might use luminosity. I know some people might use like color dodge. I personally like using add the most, because I think across like different programs I've always used add, and on Paint Tool side I think it is luminosity, but I think on Clip Studio Paint I definitely use add or add glow. And I decided to use that to add more of a warmer light to the edges, and then I adjusted it to be a little bit more purpley rather than full-on orange. Actually, no, now that I'm looking at it, it is full-on orange. Maybe I switched it from being too yellowy to being more orange. And then I'm adding an overlay layer on top, and then kind of like lessening the opacity, because I almost never use blend modes at full opacity. I find it too intense, so I kind of lower it down to adjust to whatever I need, and I will merge this down onto Albedo. But yeah, like I said, I have two different, actually I don't think I mentioned this. After I merged my sketch with my colors, I actually duplicated it because I wasn't too sure if I was sold on how I did the lighting. So technically, if I really wanted to, and I don't hate myself for wasting so much time, I could go back and fix up the lighting again if I really wanted to, but I would have to re-render everything, so I don't know if I want to. I think the smarter way to do it actually is to render everything technically and then add your blend modes after, so you have the ability to change everything. But for me, I do like painting everything on one layer as is, so I can kind of push and pull the lighting or like different sections and stuff at will without having to go through different layers and kind of changing things. So, and I think it's easier for me to understand where the lighting and the shadows are coming from once they're kind of more or less established during this phase. Yeah, I don't think I have too much to talk about in terms of rendering and cleaning up, so I'm just bringing it up to a finish that I think is complete. I'm trying to clean up any lines. I'm also getting rid of any sketchy remnants that I forgot to erase or to clear out prior, as well as like any areas that looks too out of focus or just needs a little bit more sprucing up. I will just try to fix that, especially like the eyes right now. I decided to cover up the bottom part of his eyes and change the highlight to be up on the center, and I think that helps a little bit, just because I think I put it on the opposite side into the bottom right because I had his lashes and I didn't want them to interfere, but I think for the most part it doesn't even interfere with it, so I was able to put the highlight in the upper center. So and this is what I was talking about, like I don't think his eye color is correct anymore because of my color adjustment. It no longer has that greenish yellowy tinge to it. It has more just a pure blue kind of cyan cerulean color, which kind of sucks, but you know, it's okay. I just have to keep that in mind for the future, that I need to adjust the colors correctly prior to merging and stuff, or just to, before I finish the piece, maybe I should color adjust a little bit. What else to talk about? Yeah, but rendering, it's kind of like up for your own discretion, pretty much. It's all personal preference, because rendering is not like a specific technique, or at least that's not how we were taught. It was just basically the idea of bringing a art piece or whatever you're working on to a finish level of whatever you deemed as finished. So for me, that's when I've kind of cleared out a lot of my sketchiness and kind of adjusted the colors correctly and kind of fix up any of the blurriness or like scattered lines or anything like that, and kind of making sure that things look a little bit more crisp and clean. But for some other people, sketchier is better. and some people might work on more larger chunks, leaving texture in. For me, I eliminate a lot of the texture because I personally like things looking a little bit more smooth, but not necessarily like fully blended. So yeah, basically all personal preference. Another thing I struggled with was the hair. So I think my brain kind of went into like autopilot mode for the hair, so I immediately added shadow and then like almost like a little band of highlight across his bangs. And for me, it's like, I don't think it really makes sense. Like, so if he's backlit, I don't think you're gonna have that strong of a highlight going across your hair. Now, I could be wrong, but I feel like it's something that maybe I should look up an actual reference of people in darker lighting. So like of actual, maybe like real life people or objects or anything like that that has like you know, like a shiny object that's being backlit. Like how does it look or how does things read? Because I think for me, I'm definitely lacking that knowledge, and I feel like it's like one of those things, like if you've seen other people do it in artwork and you don't understand the reason why, or you don't really question it and you kind of do it, and whenever a person questions you asking like, hey, like is this how you do this, or does this make sense, and you can't really fully defend your choices, I feel like there's a lack of understanding, unless you truly just did it because, you know, you didn't really care about the lighting. But for me, I would like to learn more about how to do better backlit pieces like this. I definitely think I didn't want to make the shadow of Albedo, like him being lit from behind or whatever, to be too dark, even though I probably would be the case for the most part. But I didn't want to do that because like I didn't want to lose entirety of all the details, as well as I didn't want him to be super dark compared to the background, because I did leave the background a little bit more atmospheric if anything. But yeah, in terms, oh yeah, here, so my iPad automatically changes to like that night mode lighting thing at 12 a.m. so I guess I did do this in maybe 3 sessions. So it has rolled over to midnight, which means that the warm lighting has turned on, and I didn't realize how much I actually really like the warm lighting, because for the most part when I was working on it for a few minutes, I think I worked on it for maybe like 6 minutes before realizing that it was super warm. I think I like the warmer lighting more than the cooler one, but when I switched it back and I realized what I was trying to achieve, I was like, maybe it is a good choice that I did the cooler lighting. I think the warmer lighting is just something like I personally like more, and I know a lot of you guys like a lot of the pieces that I do kind of like that warm lighting with kind of the more cozier atmosphere. I don't know, I think it's because like I personally like it that maybe I put more effort into it. But whenever I do like cooler lighting or like lighting that I'm not too fond of, I feel like I don't put my all into it, which kind of sucks. Also, the pose on Albedo is a little funky here. I didn't realize it until I add in this skin tone right here, that I don't think his arm makes sense, and I think his arm that's crossing across his body is a little too long, like his forearm. But I think it's because I didn't plan out the pose correctly enough. I was kind of just fiddling around with the general idea of how I wanted him to be facing, as well as just like general gesture of it, but then I didn't really flesh out the actual proper proportions, which made it look a little bit funky. I'm seeing what else to talk about here, because the thing is like I'm literally trying to only record little chunks, and I can see the end of the voiceover that I have like a what, 4 minutes left, 6 minutes left. But man, my editing program kept crashing, so I've already done this voice recording twice, and I literally don't remember what I've already talked about, other than going on like rambles about me not liking certain things. Oh, maybe that's what I can talk about. So in terms of the background and why I replaced it, I mentioned that I didn't like the foliage, the way how I had it laid out. I did do my best to add a little bit more detail in terms of the ones that were on the right side, just to give it a little bit more shadow and a little bit of lighting to make sure that it didn't look like just blobs of color on top. But I don't think it was at the beginning of the year, but I think I treated it like a New Year's resolution for my sketchbook, even though I think it was in April. I wanted to use my current sketchbook for more like plants and flowers and kind of like foliage drawing, but I don't think I fulfilled that. I think I did it for a little bit and then I completely stopped, because the thing I like to draw most obviously is people or like figures or characters and stuff, but I wanted to draw more flowers and foliage because I definitely think I'm lacking in that department again, just because like lack of practice. So whenever I draw them digitally especially, I feel like I either oversimplify the form to the point where it doesn't read to be the same type of flower. I think I also have a problem with making like the petals and stuff not receding the same way. So yeah, it's kind of like the reason why I kind of wanted a little bit more practice with that, and I think I'm gonna resume that for the kind of like the majority of the rest of my sketchbook now that I only have like a few spreads left, because yeah, I kind of want, I don't know, maybe it's just me being like, I didn't accomplish what I wanted to in the beginning. Like I did some, but I don't think I did it in the way that I wanted to. I didn't really treat them like studies. I think I did it in a way that I was just trying to fill up a spread. So I kind of want to take some time and focus on drawing some foliage and plants and flowers, so that whenever I do them digitally, that I can be a little bit better prepared and a little bit prepped, because I think I'm defaulting to like roses, daisies, I'm trying to think of like what other flowers they are, almost like Himalayan poppy kind of flowers, those kind of petals and stuff. But whenever I draw things like lilies, I don't think I know how to bend the petals in a way that makes sense, like if it's coming towards you or it's receding away from you. There's just like some forms that I don't understand, as well as like whenever I draw them digitally, I feel like I draw them much more like chunkier and thicker, to the point where they feel almost like heavier and plasticky. Oh right, so this is around like 2 a.m. ish I think, or 1 a.m. Someone's car just started going off, which is a little weird because usually that doesn't happen in my neighborhood too often. There's usually other sounds, not that kind of like car honking. But yeah, I think Albedo is pretty much done. I am just working on the final touches. So I decided to make a duplicate of the background and Albedo together. I merged them and then I used Gaussian blur to blur both of them together, put it on top, and then slowly erasing where I want basically our eyes to focus, so that every other area is kind of like more fuzzy and a little bit more softer. And then I'm using the sharp render brush to kind of do little kind of like snowflakes or crystals kind of like falling down. And then I made an extra layer, set that to addition, and I'm using that to actually do a little bit of like sparkle, kind of making a little bit more of like stuff in the foreground a little bit, just so we can fill up a little bit of the space and it looks a little less boring, at least in my opinion. I think that's why I gravitate towards like doing like little speckles, dust particles, stars, petals. Anything that kind of cuts in front of the character kind of gives it a little bit more depth. But this is Albedo finished, and here is the quick time lapse for you guys. I think I spent a lot longer on this one than my other ones because of the amount of times I was changing and adjusting. Yeah, I really didn't like the leaves here. So luckily I changed the background. I do think the background feels a little bit more empty than before, but I think it reads a little bit better than having the gold leaves being symmetrically on either side. But yeah, here is Albedo pretty much. I don't love it, but I don't hate it. I definitely want to do another redemption piece, but not like a redraw. So yeah, I'm just gonna lower these little what do you call them, like fog your breath whenever it's cold out. Yeah, hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and I'll talk to you guys next time. Bye.